Today's edition of the Spot Track Podcast is presented by Bettor Edge. Visit bettoredge.com or download the app in the iOS App Store today. Use code SPOTTRACK. Get yourself $20 off the registration and start cracking. Plenty to get to, including flash markets. Let's have some fun with that. Spot Track will be bringing you customized flash markets within the Bettor Edge system sooner rather than later, probably sometime this week as we kind of hash out that brand new element to both their system and our neck of the woods, but it'll be financially relevant, let's put it that way, in terms of what you're able to put some cash on for the upcoming free agencies and pending seasons and things like that. So we're continuing this partnership, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun for everybody. Visit bettoredge.com to get started today. My name is Mike Ginnitti. It is Tuesday, September 30th. Push this one back a little bit because the end of the Major League Baseball regular season is upon us, and that means I had to finalize some numbers and put some publication work together in that regard and flip the switch to off-season mode, which we'll get to here at the back end of the show. Dan Soemann is going to join and talk about a few of the greatest hits that we went through and are about to go through in Major League Baseball as we've been kind of ramping up over the past couple of weeks. But back on track here with the NFL season. Week 4 is basically in the books now. And unfortunately, it comes with one of the bigger injuries of the season to date, and hopefully from here out, because that was both gruesome from a physical standpoint and devastating from a career standpoint. And of course, I'm talking about Tyreek Hill, the Miami Dolphins wide receiver, who is certainly out for the remainder of the 2025 season after a dislocated kneecap that came with all sorts of ligament damage and tears. Best wishes to him, obviously, out of the gate here, and we'll flip the switch to what we have to look at, which is his contract. Here's the good news. His agent, Drew Rosenhaus, is one of the most aggressive agents in all of sports. And Tyreek has been publicly vocal about making sure that every couple of seasons, really within every second season, every other season, some kind of adjustment has been made to his contract as he both approached and now is well into his age 30 career. He's 31 and a half years old right now as he hits the shelf. He made over $27 million cash this year, at least on the books, but he's got $1.8 million of per game active bonuses this season. He's going to lose $1.4 million of that. So when it's all said and done, you're down to about the $25 million cash mark this year, which is, look, great coin for a 31-year-old wide receiver who can obviously still flash it. The problem is next year. And before I get to what is probably going to happen with Tyreek, I want to say this as kind of disclaimer, because I said it when the contract was signed. Part of doing business like Tyreek Hill and Drew Rosenhaus do is we get some guaranteed money today. We get some amplified cash today, but there's going to be some fluff built into this. Why? Because it was really important at the time of signing, August of 2024, to make this a $30 million per year contract. That was sort of the threshold at that time for where things are headed. By the way, we're at $40 million now, thanks to Jamar Chase. But in order to get that $30 million without overdoing it from a Dolphins standpoint, they added a $36 million non-guaranteed salary to 2026, which is where he stands going forward. $16 million of that can vest next March on the third league day, But as of now, nothing. No injury guarantee, no cap guarantee. None of that $36 million is locked in. It was always going to be a complete, either we extend him or we move on from him moment. Always. I mean, it's just a complete fluff fake year, basically, to inflate that AAV and get the new year cash to be $30 million per year. So that's where we were. Obviously, now with the injury, that has been expedited. Right, that process. So it's now, what does it look like when the Miami Dolphins eventually do move on from Tyreek Hill? Unfortunately, putting him back in the free agent market with a devastating leg injury. Well, there's $28 million in change of dead cap sitting on 2026. There always was going to be. That's an option bonus. That's some restructure work. And that's the original signing bonus that was tacked on here. Actually, it's 3 signing bonuses from iterations of contracts that have come forward. But $28 million in change of dead cap. It was almost a $52 million total cap hit as it was. So before anything vests in early March, the most likely outcome here is that the Dolphins just cut bait. Do they want to wait and do an injury settlement situation? Do they want to wait and do this post 6-1? It's 23 and change savings if they just kind of rip the Band-Aid off. Any kind of post 6-1 work could be 36 million saved if they want to carry that cap hit for now. There's obviously some ways to finagle this, but I think the most likely outcome here is that Hill is released. The Dolphins save about 23 million against the cap before the start of the league year, and everybody goes their separate ways. And by the way, because of who the Dolphins appear to be, and which was much anticipated, I have a feeling that Tyreek Hill's contract is not going to be a one of one in terms of what gets moved on from in 2026. I'm not necessarily going all the way up the ladder to Tua, because Tua's got one more really strong guaranteed vesting year here in 2026. But there will be a point in this in the next couple of months here, I'm anticipating, where the Dolphins season has completely gone in the tank, and we are starting to talk about bubble players, to put it generously. So that's Tyreek. Let's get some positive news, because another thing we're taking away from week 4 is that there are some players approaching extension eligibility that are going to absolutely break the bank. Obviously, we're on Daniel Jones' watch, okay, because he, despite the loss to the Rams, the devastating loss to the Rams, Daniel Jones continues to play at an extremely high level with strong weapons, but not elite weapons, with an above average offensive line, but not an elite offensive line. In other words, everything about this Colts team right now appears to be above average, and he is a big part of that. If that continues, this is obviously Sam Darnold 2.0. Will it be a 1-year guarantee for him next year? Or will it be a situation where he's walking into a multi-year extension in Indianapolis? All of that is TBD, but we've got a value rankings chart on SpotTrack that week to week, with statistics and some advanced metrics, basically sets a Madden grade, for lack of a better term, on every single player within the SpotTrack structure. Jones sits atop that list right now in terms of quarterbacks. He's the best value quarterback in football with this $14 million average salary. But the guy to look at right now, and I think the biggest takeaway from week 4, is Puka Nacua, who carries the highest grade in terms of value in SpotTrack in the entire NFL right now. He's 24 going on 25. He might not even be considered the number one option on his own team with Devontae Adams in the fold, but he is certainly the number one target in all of football right now. And what he's doing, what he's on pace for, is a historic rate. So Puka becomes extension eligible this December once the regular season closes. It's obviously going to be a Rams priority, despite the fact that the quarterback position might be TBD in 2026. But this is not one of those players that you simply punt on because you're trying to figure some other things out. He has turned into arguably a top 3 wide receiver in all of football. Certainly the metrics believe he should be in that conversation. But what I thought was interesting, as more of a global conversation here quickly, is that this value list is loaded with extension candidates, whether it's for the first time on a rookie deal or players that were kind of teetering through the process this past offseason, but are now playing at a level that is going to ensure them a massive payday going forward. So I'm talking about Tucker Kraft, who becomes eligible for the first time in Green Bay. He might be the best weapon that Jordan Love has right now. Charles Cross, the left tackle for Seattle, who is finally rounded into form after being a big draft pick for them over the past couple of seasons. Tyler Lindenbaum, the Baltimore Ravens center, who probably should have been paid this past offseason, but man, Baltimore had some mouths to feed. I would expect both he and Lamar to get life-changing contract extensions over the course of the next few months here. Jordan Davis in Philadelphia, maybe you've heard about him, and a couple of other defensive linemen for Philadelphia. He's on the brink of a major payday. And how about kicker talk? Brandon Aubrey for Dallas, obviously the best value kicker in football because he's the best kicker in football, and he's a pending free agent. So you want to talk about the next big back and forth for Jerry Jones to get into. How about the highest kicker contract in the history of football? That's probably next on the docket for Jerry Jones. And one more quick name. It's Brian Branch, a safety out of Detroit. Again, the Lions had so many mouths to feed. Branch is going to get that big extension, most likely, this offseason. And he and Aiden Hutchinson, probably the next big 1-2 punch in terms of contract extensions, maybe even top of the market contract extensions on that Lions defensive front. So there's names here. There's names all over here. This list will continue to flex weekly, but Jones has been here rock solid for 4 weeks. Kenneth Walker in Seattle has been here for 4 weeks, and Puka certainly has performed himself into be an elite wide receiver on the brink of his extension eligibility. All right, plenty more to get to in the NFL. We'll have some articles posted on SpotTrack.com in the coming days here, but let's flip the switch to baseball with Dan Soemann. All right, Dan, first and foremost, congratulations. Big Guardians apologist. That was a hell of a 2-month stretch for you. Kind of a roller coaster, right? I think back and forth, you kind of gave up for a bit, as you should have, with 12, 13 games out of this conversation. And you won the freaking division. I mean, as a Mets apologist myself, and you being a Guardians apologist, I don't think our seasons could have gone more polar opposite than they did. And yet here we are, side by side on a podcast discussing let's just keep it positive today, because there's been so much why the Mets fall off a cliff. I don't think I need to reiterate that. You all know where it started and where it came to. And we'll just say this as we approach our MLB offseason, I don't know, 6-pack of podcasts here going over the next couple of weeks. The Mets are one of the teams to watch, not just because of the collapse, but because of their pending free agents, their option decisions, what's going to happen with this payroll. Are they going to double down on the payroll? We've got a potential lockout looming in 18 months that players and agents might want to be aggressively ahead of. And obviously, Steve Cohen and his bank account could be one of the people who do some damage over the course of the next few months. But we've got time for that. Let's not try to gameplay what the Mets have to do to get themselves back in the playoffs, because we've got 12 teams that did make the playoffs starting this afternoon with your Guardians against the Tigers. Just your sense. We always have a couple of teams that sneak into the postseason with payroll value, Dan. But I wasn't expecting 3 teams to be near the bottom of the payroll list. But that's what we have in 2025. Obviously, your Guardians with the 25th payroll. Certainly the Reds sneaking in there against, over the Mets. They're in the 20s. And the Brewers are in the 20s in terms of 2025 payroll. Your thoughts on those 3 teams specifically? I think if I go back to originally to our preview podcasts where we did some over-under work, some divisional work, we were both kind of snake bitten by this Brewers team, who we thought was at least going to take a step back after a weird offseason. But we did have some momentum for this Reds team, who did eventually get to the finish line. So not completely surprising, but those 3 teams specifically in terms of the value payrolls, your thoughts as they approach the postseason?
Well, I mean, the Players Association probably hates this from these teams that keep habitually getting into the postseason with low payrolls. Now, I mean, these are good organizations, top to bottom. We talk about this at length all the time. So now I do have doubts, let's say, about any of them being actual World Series contenders. So I think as we see play out, as we get to the end of the postseason, typically the bigger spenders are the ones left in the end. We typically see that play out. I assume that's how it will play out this year. But as always, we know it's baseball. Tons of parity in the way these series can play out, the short sample size nature of it. Anything can happen. So would it surprise me if one of these teams was in the World Series? Not necessarily. Would it surprise me if one of them won the World Series? I would say yes.
That's a really funny angle to start with, the Players Association side of it, because we are, approaching these negotiations and the potential lockout situation. I mean, this is at least a little bit of leverage for them, right? To say, look, there's no need for a salary cap. We've got $80 million payrolls in the postseason. Now, yes, it's an expanded playoff set, and yes, the Guardians got in the final 5 minutes of the season. But, for the most part, I wasn't expecting 3 teams in the 20s to be here, and there are. So this has got to be a positive step for the small market teams that, don't refuse. There's no refusal to pay from these teams. They're just simply not getting the players that they're asserting themselves for because of what the Dodgers and the Mets and the Angels and the Phillies can do on a regular basis. So certainly doesn't poo-poo the conversation that there should be stronger thresholds both at the bottom and the top, but it's an interesting way to start that, the league, the Players Association themselves have to be happy that these three teams exist right now. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and the long and short of it, I mean, if there was a salary floor, teams would come up and adjust,
They
accordingly.
would, of
course. But my point is these, a handful of these smaller market teams have shown that you can spend. You can create a model and operate within a certain budget effectively, but you have to commit to that. I mean, there's something to be said. David Stearns excelling in Milwaukee, whether that was him, whether that was the organizational structure, et cetera, who knows really, but there's probably something to be said about a GM specifically operating in this sort of market. Like Chris Antonetti, you take him out of Cleveland, put him somewhere else. He was in contention for the Cardinals, the Red Sox at one point. You put him in a different market and maybe they don't excel quite the same way. Maybe that's sort of what we're seeing with David Stearns at this point. Who knows? But there's a lot to be said about just having an open checkbook to write towards any player. So that's what I think is going to be so interesting about the Mets transition this year is they kind of have to thread multiple needles, and we'll see how that plays out, but we'll save that for another day. In terms of these three teams, though, let me flip it on its head. We did see two big spenders not make the playoffs in the Astros and the Mets, both luxury tax teams projected to be over the $241 million threshold this year. So there is parity on both sides there. Spending doesn't necessarily equate to winning or losing, if you will.
It doesn't, but your point is valid that usually by the time we get to Halloween, it's the big spenders still existing. So we'll see if that tracks again this season. But yeah, it was a fairly regulated season in terms of how the financials worked out. The Dodgers bought themselves, enough depth to be able to handle their injury situation. The Mets starting pitching kind of fell off exactly as everybody predicted it to do before the season started. The Yankees really withstood a hell of a lot of injuries. In fact, they were top 2 in terms of injury pay this year. And you had teams like Houston, Texas, and Atlanta, top 10 tax payrolls, not make the postseason this year after going through a bounty of injuries. And I guess just weird gameplay from those rosters. Those rosters probably get some sort of shakeup. Certainly Texas has already started with moving on from Bruce Bochy. We'll see how aggressive Houston is this year to get themselves out of taxpayer situations, but maybe still relevant in that division. Who's the team that's in this postseason now, has gone through the iterations of the year, right? They've gone through basically their financials, their trades, all the processes that it takes to get through 162 games and still be alive in October. Who's the team right now that you think had the most successful overall season from a business standpoint, Dan?
Oh, the Dodgers are the easy team just because of what they have going on there. But biggest step forward, I think organizationally, I think the Red Sox took a big step forward. I know we've kind of hammered them at certain points here for, not us. Some people have hammered them for the Devers trade, et cetera.
Right.
I'd say they've made some big steps going forward in terms of being competitive this year and being sustainable in the future. Pieces they've locked up long-term, just cornerstone players. Garrett Crochet locked up. You have a bona fide ace there. So I think long-term, the Red Sox are a team I'm not necessarily counting on to go far this year. Could make a run, but I like where they're headed at, towards the future. And from a business standpoint, I have to assume getting back to relevancy in Boston is a big part of it there.
Yeah, I think that's an easy one to latch on to, and we'll see how aggressive they become this offseason because they're going to have a ton of value in the position players with what they've been able to do, out of Anthony and Mayer and those guys. But that's certainly a team to be watching this offseason. I think the Mariners belong in this conversation for sure. Their deadline acquisitions didn't necessarily pan out, and we'll see if that, maybe picks up steam a little bit here in the postseason. But this is a team that's been sort of on the fringe for now, I don't know, the better part of 3-4 seasons. They're kind of in their window of having young prime pitching grow up together and now kind of become a serious rotation that can compete with pretty much anyone in the league. That's generally good news for a team in October and November, especially if you can hit the ball out of the ballpark as well. So I do think there's some standing there with what they've been able to homegrown develop, acquire, somewhat sign in free agency, though they've lacked in that regard. We'll see if that changes this winter. But I think that's a team not only to watch over the course of the next couple of months, but through the offseason, and could be aggressive with Boston to try to take that next step and compete with, the Yankees, the Blue Jays, and we'll see if anybody else sort of unveils themselves in the American League this season. But pretty vanilla stuff from the playoff standpoint, right? The Phillies are going to be big contenders. The Dodgers, I think, are the favorites out of the gate here. But, I haven't looked at odds yet. I haven't done that work. I'm still working on the financial side of things. What's your take in terms of who the World Series matchup is right now in terms of betting favorites? Is it as vanilla as Dodgers Yankees?
No, I'm actually staring at it right now. I have been watching this a little bit, and so I am a little biased too. This is a little bit of pumping my own bags. I have current Phillies and Blue Jays World Series winners. I think I'm tempted to add some Padres. I'm sorry, not as a series. I bet Phillies World Series winner preseason, Blue Jays World Series winner preseason. I have such good values on that I think I want to add the Padres at 16-1 odds. I really like their path. I think they have a strong team, one of the best bullpens. Starting rotation is the weakness, but good teams can work around that the way they're built. So, but sorry, I jumped the shark. Back to your original question. I'm seeing the Phillies as the favorites right now. Mariners, wow. Phillies, Mariners, and then the Dodgers not far off. Blue Jays not far off.
Wow.
Yankees, so Brewers.
It's Cubs, about the pitching staff, huh? Obviously. I mean, that's what that is. Those are the two best pitching staffs, two deepest pitching staffs, at least, even without Zach Wheeler, that I think we have going into this whole situation. So
yeah, I think the Phillies might surprise people and surprise me a little bit, especially without Zach Wheeler, but the depth everywhere. I mean, their rotation is solid. Their offense is incredible. Their depth there, they're just really constructed well in all facets of the game. They could still make a run even sans Zach Wheeler, which, a lot of people sort of wrote them off. Trey Turner got hurt. People weren't sure if that he was even going to make it back for the playoffs. He did get back. So I think they're really well constructed. And to your point, the pitching, that's the separator there. Obviously, the Dodgers have one of the best offenses in the game, can compete with anyone, but I think there's just way more stability in the Phillies rotation and the Mariners rotation, which you alluded to just a minute ago, and that's why they're the top two World Series odds at the moment.
Yeah, there's no question, and we can kind of transition into the next piece here, which is, the pending free agents. We've obviously got our market valuations live on Spot Track. I have some analysis work done on these top guys, and quite frankly, Dan, the Phillies are the team that you can't kind of look away from, not only through this postseason, not only obviously now that they're the favorites, but what you're going to be watching on this Phillies team, a lot of is players looking for their next contract. That's Ranger Suarez, who might get the game 2 start. I would assume Christopher Sanchez, who's recently been extended in his control years, is their ace heading into the postseason. But Ranger Suarez, for sure. Kyle Schwarber, the probably runner-up in the NL MVP case, who's got 50-plus bombs and needs a new contract in 2026. And then JT Realmuto, their catcher, who's getting up there in age and certainly isn't the 5-tool player that he was in his heyday, but he's in for a big contract. And that's just kind of, on the surface here. That's definitely one of the teams that's going to flip the switch quickly to having the names that are going to attract some of these Bostons and Seattles and other teams that are looking to build on this. So that's a big part of this. And by the way, I'm leaving out Harrison Bader, former Mets superstar center fielder, not so much, who just turned himself all of a sudden into one of the best hitting center fielders in all of baseball as a member of this Phillies lineup. He's going to be a player to watch because he can triple his compensation this coming off season. as a player in need. I think he's got a mutual option that he'll punt on himself there, right, Dan?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, perhaps I mean, I'm not looking at a comprehensive list here, but dare I say the trade acquisition of the of the season, Harrison Bader. People thought he was going to be
Yeah.
like a platoon center fielder there, and he's pretty much played every day, to the point where he unlocked a couple of different incentive thresholds, getting to 500 plate appearances, which did increase a buyout he has on a $10 million mutual option. So the mutual option was getting killed either way, but now he's increased his buyout there. He's definitely opting out of that contract. So,
Yeah.
but nonetheless, yeah, what a pickup he's been down the line comparatively to what he's been in previous seasons.
All right. I've got a list of kind of like top free agents. We're going to meld two conversations together. Top free agents on these playoff teams. So in other words, who should we be watching? Who stands to make themselves extra millions of dollars over the course of the next 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how things go for their teams respectively, right? So let's start with the Blue Jays. I'm just kind of going in chronological order here. The Blue Jays, we talked about Bo Bichette last week. He's obviously the tip of that iceberg for this Toronto offseason after they paid Vlad Jr. and they put themselves into a taxpayer situation for 2025 and probably for the future here. But Chris Bassett is going to be a name you're going to see. He's going to get probably one of those first 2 starts for Toronto. He's in his mid-30s. He's the exact same pitcher he's been for the past 8 years. He's just so damn consistent and reliable. That's certainly a name to watch. I'm going to put the Boston Red Sox back on you because, man, there's some question marks here, especially if they want to be uber aggressive with these top free agents that are going to be available. We're all expecting Alex Bregman to opt out, but he probably shouldn't be going anywhere, right, Dan? This is probably the best fit for him now with the Devers trade and everything that's kind of conspired.
Yeah, it seems like it's just an obvious path here. I mean, we try not to fall in love with like the romantic idea of players reuniting with their team they just opted out of or left via free agency. All the pieces sort of fit here that I like this. We've been talking about this at length. Scott Boras did this exact same thing with Matt Chapman.
Yeah.
It seems that's like destiny.
How many good years at third base does Bregman have left?
I mean, typically we start to see things round out here as he approaches, he's going to be 32 by the time the 2026 season starts. I don't want to put a number on it, but I mean, I think he's got a couple more years left in him at third base. He's still playing like an elite level of defense there. He's staying healthy on the field. I don't necessarily see why they would need to alter that. So I don't want to put a number on it, but I think the first part of any multi-year deal that he signs for sure.
Okay. Jarren Duran. This is a guy that's going to pop off the screen this postseason. He's just one of those players that has explosive moments. He's a strong defensive outfielder, big arm, put himself into a situation where, he's got like a 14 combined WAR over the past 2 seasons. I mean, this is a guy that can really fill up the stat sheet. He's got a really nice club option coming up here. It's about $8 million, but Boston's going to have to mix some things together, which is a balance of these young prospects that have been recently called up that are going to fill up the starting lineup quickly on the cheap with potentially massive free agent acquisitions here. Is this a name you expect to be at least on the fringe for 2026 with this team? Is this a trade candidate?
It seems likely because, to be clear, if they don't pick up the $8 million club option, which seems very likely, he would be arbitration eligible. That's right. One of we talk about these heavily at arbitration time, but so basically, would the Red Sox see that $8 million of value? I think for sure. But in the same token, we've talked about like the musical chairs of the Red Sox. You have Jarren Duran, you have Ceddanne Rafaela, who can play the infield, but it seems sort of like destined to be like a center fielder utility type. Wilyer Abreu, Roman Anthony. You start to run out of places to play these guys full time. So if they are looking to make a major roster shakeup, it seems likely that Wilyer Abreu or Jarren Duran would be the player that moves in that situation. it's hard to project which one it could be, but I do think Duran would be. I mean, we've heard trade chatter with him before. They ultimately kept him at the deadline. Who knows if that was real legitimate rumors or not? I think that there was, but potential trade candidate. Let's leave it there.
I think they exercise just to have the trade chip available to them, because I do believe that when teams swing and miss, they'll be looking for that as kind of a plan B in a lot of cases. Trevor Story and his opt-out situation, I think he's got 3 for $75 remaining on this contract. Where does he stand? I know it's been kind of an injury-riddled career in Boston, but a guy who can probably make some bank here over the course of the next couple of weeks if things go well, right?
I don't see him opting out of this. I think it's pretty much settled. If the amount he was opting out of was lower, I would think it's on the table, but this is going to be, a pressure point at some point, probably mid next season, where they have internal youth options they would prefer to get on the field, and Trevor Story is sort of clogging things up. He did show some flashes at points this year when he was healthy. I just think they sort of want to do more of a youth movement, and he might be I think he opts in, but he could be a guy that the Red Sox look to move on from. I mean, they'd have to probably eat a good chunk of that money, but he could be a player that also essentially is returning to the Red Sox but gets traded before the start of next season, in my opinion.
Let's flip to the Yankees. Has Cody Bellinger done enough over the past 2 seasons to warrant a big 6-year, $200 million-ish contract this offseason?
Oh, I don't want to get that carried away. I think he's done enough to opt out. I think he definitely opts out. He's done enough, in my opinion, to get to kind of re-up on a multi-year deal at a similar AAV as he's gotten the past few years. I don't want to get carried away with any substantial $200 million guarantee, though.
I think it's possible. I think it's possible that we get to that point in time. He just turned 30. This is his best season in 8 years, essentially, since the MVP season out in LA. But you're right. He still hasn't been able to string together enough maybe to be that multi-year guy. But we'll see if it's a 3-year guarantee this time around at a pretty good AAV. Probably to return to the Yankees, I would imagine. Quickly, Kyle Tucker. It's been weird, right? And it remains weird. And I think the reason you're picking the Padres is that this Cubs team is banged up and maybe a little bit outside of themselves right now heading into this wild card series. But is he still the guy, Dan? Are we still going to look at Kyle Tucker as the pinnacle of this free agency offseason?
Yeah, I mean, maybe the cap has a ceiling that's a little lower than we thought of 6 months ago. But I mean, the age, the past production, unless we find out there was some major injury this past year that, he dealt with in the second half.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see things changing drastically. I still think he's to be clear, I still think he is the premier guy available on the market. If anything, maybe just the overall ceiling is a little bit less than we've seen, obviously, in past years with some of these bigger names that were available.
I definitely think there's been a bit of a deflation here. Just common sense, just logic. Right now, the player is still the player. But I think a return to Chicago seems out of question at this point in time. Is that crazy? Doesn't it seem like this Cubs team is right there and ready for the taking, and yet something's still off, right? It just seems like there's the dots aren't all connected for some reason. Maybe that changes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't think you were implying this. I never thought he was going to re-sign a long-term extension unless before he reached free agency, unless the Cubs blew the doors off of him. Once we got to the start of the season, I thought it was totally off the table. Now I think it's even probably more unlikely to happen. Even them reuniting with him, I think that they might try and spread that out in different ways. Also, we have talked about they have a number of options that can play in the outfield, so it's not like they have a giant glaring need where they have to bring him back, where some other teams might feel pressured into that situation. But the vibes on the Cubs are pretty brutal right now. And I like the Padres because of their potential path. The Cubs, like I said, the vibes aren't great. They would then probably play Milwaukee, who I am not a total believer in. And then let's just say they get to the Phillies or the Dodgers. I mean, I think they're one of the best matchups for the Dodgers just because of the rivalry. We've seen them in the past matchup really well with them. They beat them. They almost beat them last year in the postseason. And some people think that the Padres would have went on a run that the Dodgers then did. But so that's why at 16-1, I like the Padres path to a potential World Series. Otherwise, I'm still with the favorites. But
yeah, let's finish with the Padres, who probably have the second best playoff free agent resume in this lot, right? Outside of the Phillies, who we've already mentioned here. But it's a previously acquired Ryan O'Hearn, Robert Suarez, the closer, arguably the best closer in the league, not named Edwin Diaz. Luis Ariz, the multiple batting champion, who people can't seem to figure out how to use him properly. The Padres have done a nice job with that. Michael King, sort of the hybrid starter reliever who's been up and down, but we can certainly hold his own. And then Dylan Cease, who at the start of the season was the big trade chip that didn't get traded and now becomes one of the preeminent free agents, despite the fact that his market maybe has deflated a little bit himself. But those are names, right? Those are names that, let me put it this way. I don't expect maybe any of those names back with the Padres next year. Is that fair? Right? Just how they operate. It's sort of like a revolving door situation in San Diego so much, and it's effective for them. It re-inspires, reinvigorates them every year. And by the way, I think it's the best way to try to keep up with the Dodgers is to keep throwing brand new, exciting, fresh lineups of talented, athletic players at that division for 160 games. It's really served them well, and I expect that to be the case with this group as well.
For sure. I love what they're doing. It would give me anxiety if it was my team.
Yeah. What jersey do you buy?
Yeah. And it's not even just that. It's just like I guess I've been, ingrained to always like be a prospect clutcher, but at the same token, the amount of prospects that could have been traded for valuable players in real time that never, those prospects that never panned out to be anything. There's something that I love about him, AJ Preller, just being willing to freewheel and deal, knowing that they develop talent so well in that organization that they will have a pipeline to backfill. And it's mostly they've made some trades that have hurt them overall, right? The Juan Soto trade. They've given up valuable pieces in other deals, that have turned out lopsided against them. But overall, it's not like, this has been going on for a decade now, and they're still relevant, still locking up guys long term. So I love that. I love the way he's operating. It would just, from the way that I root for my small market team, it'd be scary for me. Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is they're going to pay the piper at some point here. It's going to catch up to them, just in terms of guys aging out. Darvish, we've seen, he's got big time financials committed to him. He's maybe unusable at this point. Guys like that, this will come back to bite them, where they really have nowhere else to turn, that they'll probably have to have a couple bottom of the barrel seasons. But it's kind of like, would you rather operate like this or be a team that is in contention for 10 years but never actually wins anything?
So you're dead on here. And why it feels so different is that so many baseball franchises, and most of them are the smaller markets who either don't have or aren't choosing to allocate a lot of money annually to their roster, right? So many of them still think that this sport is in it for the long game, that we have to build our rosters not only for today, but for 6 years from now, and think about the development pool and the draft pool and the international pool as one big thing, one big pipeline that feeds into the next 10 years, so that we have job security and we have butts and seats and we can sell and market. And AJ Preller and the Padres have just said, we're going to be the Philadelphia Eagles. Okay. We're going to fix a problem for the next 2 months right now. And then if that problem is no longer needed, we will move on from that player in 3 months or in this offseason, and we'll figure out what our next gaps are. They are in the immediacy. And so little baseball teams operate that way, even in 2025, even for 2026. That is the biggest thing that I want this new CBA to change. I want every team to be thinking about right now. And that is what a spending floor and to some degree a cap will force. It will force teams to operate every year as if it matters every year. And too many teams are thinking about how it's not our year, so let's look to 4 years ahead. Okay. Because by the way, that's also been successful. We've seen the Astros do that. We've seen the Mets redo that over the course of their leadership change. We've seen teams completely reinvent themselves. Hell, even the Red Sox went through this after the Mookie Betts trade and decided that they're in the 4-year plan. They're not going to worry about the next couple of seasons and be a short-term team. If every team is thinking even a little bit like the Padres think, which is we have a second base problem, we're going to fix it today. It's not going to be something we look ahead to as a whole we have to patch. If that's the mindset, this sport will be not only so much better for itself, but so much easier to market and follow and latch onto because there'll be more daily news, more daily back and forth. Things that go wrong are even more marketable, right? When you get a disastrous situation, financially speaking, it's to your benefit sometimes. Okay. Now it sucks. You have to pay your way out of it, but yeah, I'm with you. That's what makes this team so attractive. And at some point in time, it has to work. So why not this year when they have maybe one of the easier paths to get through the next couple of weeks? I'm with you.
Yeah, I that's sort of why I keep pushing the Padres and the Phillies. They both have feelings of like the 2019 Nationals to me, where like teams who have been pushing creatively, adding via free agency, via trades, who are like kind of knocking on the door and just haven't been able to push through, but are also facing moments of reckoning after the season. Like the Phillies are going to go through a little bit of a half step back this year. If they don't win it, this is going to be that year. So just like the Nationals had to tear down after that 2019 season a little bit, I think the Padres and Phillies are like in that same window, if you will, where like they've been like the trajectory has led here, and this is a year that like they have a legitimate shot at it, I think. And if they don't, then they're going to have to kind of go back to the drawing board in some ways. I mean, they're not going to the bottom of the basement by any means. I'm just saying they're going to have to retool on the fly after this year based on the financials.
Okay. And just so you're aware, I didn't leave your team out accidentally. They just don't have any free agents worth talking about, as is usually the case with Cleveland, who tends to extend themselves internally more than any team in the league. So much of the roster is on team control. And the biggest concern heading into 2026 is this gambling scandal. And if you're going to have to repatch the back end of your rotation or your bullpen because your valued starter, or excuse me, closer is probably on the shelf indefinitely still. So good on you.
And just to round all this out, back to our original point with the David Stearns GM fits the market. Like AJ Preller has his lane, he picks it and he runs with it and he excels with it. Cleveland does a similar thing where in my group chats, Josh Naylor got traded this offseason. Everyone said, why are we trading our cleanup hitter, starting first baseman for this pitcher Slade Cecconi? Well, now Slade Cecconi is going to start theoretically your game 3 of the wild card here. If he's a cost-effective pitcher for the next 4.5 seasons, then you probably came out okay in that trade, even though you gave up Josh Naylor, who probably just had another career year, but is headed towards free agency next year. So I think the point here is like these certain GMs, certain teams, organizations have their lane where they operate and they're good at that. And I don't really want to crush them for not, moving outside of that comfort zone too much. So that I'll round it out with that.
Good stuff. Let's talk again soon. Plenty to get to.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks.